On an October morning in 2025, the halls of His Majesty's Prison Wakefield, infamously nicknamed Monster Mansion, fell eerily silent as news spread of a violent incident inside. A former rock star lay gravely wounded. Years earlier, Ian Watkins had stood on stage under bright lights, adored by thousands. Now, within prison walls that housed Britain's most notorious criminals, his story was hurtling toward a dark end. How is it that this boy from Wales climbed to rock stardom, and yet it was his descent into depravity that shocked the world? And finally, how did the infamous prison built to contain Britain's most dangerous allow his life to come to a brutal close? Ian David Carslake Watkins was born in 1977 in Merthyr Tydfil, Wales. By his late teens, his passion for music had set him on a path toward stardom. In 1997, in the Welsh town of Pontypridd, Watkins co-founded the band Lostprophets with his school friend Lee Gaze. What started in a local scene quickly grew to an international sensation. Watkins, with his charismatic stage presence and boyish good looks, became the lead singer and frontman of the alternative rock band that would define his early life. Lostprophets burst onto the scene in the early 2000s, riding the tide of rock's new millennium resurgence. By the mid-2000s, Lostprophets were a staple of rock festivals and music charts. The band released 5 studio albums, 4 of them climbing into the UK top 10, even scoring a UK #1 album in 2006 with Liberation Transmission. They sold millions of albums worldwide, earning 2 UK top 10 singles and a #1 spot on the US alternative chart, while collecting multiple music awards along the way. Songs like Last Train Home and Rooftops became anthems for a generation of rock fans, their music videos filling the airwaves. Watkins was the face of it all, the energetic frontman whose crowd-surfing performances and swooping vocals captivated audiences. By 2012, Lostprophets were on top of the world. That April, they released their 5th and what would be their final album, Weapons, to an eager fan base. The band's live shows were reportedly electrifying. In fact, their final gig together took place on November 14, 2012 in Newport, Wales, though at the time no one knew it would be their last. At that show, as at countless others, Watkins basked in the adoration flowing from the crowd. He flashed a rock star smile, the picture of triumph. Yet, just beyond the edge of those bright stage lights, a shadow was growing. There were murmurs among those who knew him intimately, hints that the frontman's off-stage life was not as innocent as it seemed. Night after night, Ian Watkins sang of hope and passion, but behind closed doors, a very different story was unfolding, one that would soon erupt into public view. The cheers of fans would turn to gasps of horror. The rise to fame was complete. Now, the slow, sickening descent was about to begin. The facade of his rock star glamour began crumbling in late 2012. Unbeknownst to the cheering fans, and not nearly as early as they should have been, police had been watching Ian Watkins. In December 2008, an ex-girlfriend named Joanne Miedzielec had come forward with alarming claims, telling authorities that Watkins harbored deviant desires and offering evidence of serious crimes. She even handed over a mobile phone message in which Watkins expressed fantasies of abusing children. Shockingly, those early warnings were not heeded. At the time, investigators dismissed her report as malicious and never even examined the phone evidence. It was a mischance, sadly one of many, that allowed Watkins to continue his depraved double life for several more years. The Independent Police Complaints Commission later concluded that Watkins could have been caught nearly 4 years earlier had these tip-offs been properly pursued. But by 2012, fate and law enforcement were finally closing in. On September 21, 2012, In a twist of fate, South Wales police executed a drugs warrant at Watkins's home in Pontypridd. What they found went far beyond narcotics. Officers discovered a hidden trove of child abuse images and videos on computers, phones, and storage devices seized from the property. The charismatic singer who had sold millions of records was now confronted with the sickening evidence of his secret life. Watkins was arrested on December 17, 2012, as part of an expansive investigation codenamed Operation Globe, and the charges that followed were almost beyond comprehension. When the news broke, fans and the public were stunned. Ian Watkins, a man whose posters hung on teenagers' bedroom walls, was charged with a litany of child sex offenses. The allegations detailed by prosecutors caused nausea and disbelief even among veteran detectives. Watkins was accused of conspiring with 2 women to sexually assault young children, and possession and distribution of indecent images of children. Some of the material involved extreme pornography with animals. One charge stood out as especially horrific, and it involved an 11-month-old infant, the child of one of his co-defendants. It was a crime so depraved that seasoned officers, hardened by years on the job, struggled to process it. "This case breaks new ground," remarked one shocked investigator, emphasizing how rarely, if ever, they had encountered such heinous acts. As the case headed to court, more disturbing facts emerged. Watkins had leveraged his fame and charisma to draw in vulnerable admirers and corrupt them. The 2 co-defendant women, known only as Woman A and Woman B in court, were revealed to be the mothers of children he abused. These women, die-hard fans under his sway, had effectively handed over their own babies to facilitate Watkins's perversion. In one instance, he encouraged a fan to abuse her infant on camera while he watched via webcam. Such revelations painted Watkins not just as a criminal, but as a manipulator of the worst sort, someone who used his power over fawning young fans to exploit them, as the court later observed. Watkins initially pleaded not guilty to the charges, maintaining a facade of innocence even as evidence mounted. A trial was set for late 2013, and the world braced for a horrific court case. But in a dramatic turn, on November 26, 2013, at the last moment before trial, Ian Watkins changed his plea to guilty on 11 of 24 charges. It was a sweeping admission of guilt, encompassing the most serious offenses: an attempted rape, 3 other counts of sexual assault involving children, 7 counts of making or possessing indecent images of children, and 1 of possessing an extreme pornographic image involving a sex act on an animal. His last-minute capitulation spared the victims' families of the trauma of a full trial. In December 2013, in Cardiff Crown Court, Ian Watkins stood on the dock to be sentenced, a shell of the rock star he once was. No amount of mitigation could soften the judgment that was about to befall him. Mr. Justice John Royce, the presiding judge, delivered a scathing condemnation that echoed through the courtroom. The crimes of Ian Watkins, the judge intoned, had plunged into new depths of depravity, far beyond anything the court had witnessed. Any decent person, he continued, will experience shock, revulsion, and incredulity at what Watkins had done. Finally, Justice Royce pronounced the sentence. Ian Watkins would serve 29 years in prison for his crimes, with an additional 6 years on extended license for public protection, effectively a 35-year sentence in total. He would not even be considered for release until at least 2/3 of the jail term was served, meaning the early 2040s at best, and likely never, given the nature of his offenses. His two female accomplices, the mothers who had facilitated his abuse of their children, were also sent to prison for 14 and 17 years respectively. Outside the courthouse, there was an air of grim vindication. Watkins's former bandmates in Lostprophets, who had disbanded the group immediately after his arrest in 2013, issued statements of disgust and sorrow for the victims. Ian Watkins left the courthouse as an inmate, a new identity for a new life in prison. But even as the cell doors closed on Watkins, the saga was far from over. A darker, perhaps even more dangerous chapter lay ahead. Remember, if you're a fan of true crime, please click the like and subscribe buttons below. It helps me keep sharing unsettling stories like this each week. Ian Watkins entered the British prison system as one of the most notorious convicts of his time. Inmates convicted of crimes against children are marked men behind bars, despised by many of their fellow prisoners. For someone as high profile as Watkins, the risk would be exceptionally high. Early on, authorities placed him on suicide watch given the shock of his downfall. But it soon became clear that Watkins's biggest threat would not be himself. It would be those around him. Watkins began serving his sentence in 2013. In the parlance of the prison system, he was a Category A prisoner, under maximum security due to the heinous nature of his crimes and the target on his back. Eventually, Watkins was moved to HMP Wakefield in West Yorkshire, an aging Victorian fortress of a prison known for containing rapists, murderers, and high-profile sex offenders. Wakefield's nickname, Monster Mansion, came from its roster of inmates, serial killers, child abusers, and the like. Life in prison was harsh for him. He was segregated for his own safety much of the time. Still, danger lurked. Watkins soon learned that his celebrity offered no protection on the inside. In fact, it made him a potential trophy target for violent inmates eager to earn bragging rights for harming a notorious pedophile. He complained of constant threats. In phone calls and letters, Watkins described a bleak existence. Murderers, mass murderers, rapists, pedophiles, serial killers, the worst of the worst surrounded him, he told a court at one hearing. The glamorous world of rock concerts was a distant memory, replaced by the grim rituals of prison life. Head counts, cell checks, and the daily fear that someone might slip a blade between his ribs. In his new life, surrounded by danger, Watkins tried to keep a low profile. Trouble found him anyway. In early 2018, 4 years into his term, prison officers at Wakefield received a tip that Watkins might be hiding contraband. During a routine strip search, guards found a tiny 8-centimeter mobile phone hidden on his person. It was a blatant violation of prison rules and a criminal offense. Watkins was caught secretly harboring the phone, and a new investigation began. At a court hearing in 2019 over the incident, Watkins astonishingly claimed he had been forced by other inmates to hold on to the phone. He testified that 2 unnamed prisoners wanted to use the phone to contact women who were writing letters to Watkins, hoping to lure those women into sending money, effectively using the disgraced singer's remaining fan mail as a revenue stream. According to Watkins, these inmates had threatened to harm him if he didn't comply. "You would not want to mess with them," he said in court, refusing to name the culprits. The judge didn't doubt that Watkins was under duress, but rules are rules. Watkins was found guilty of possessing the phone and had an extra 10 months added to his sentence in 2019. By this point, Watkins had developed a reputation among fellow prisoners, not just for his infamy, but also as someone who might be vulnerable. A 2023 official report on HMP Wakefield noted that violence in the prison had increased markedly, and that many inmates, particularly older men convicted of sexual offenses, felt unsafe around a growing population of younger, more aggressive prisoners. Then, things blew up. On August 5, 2023, news emerged that Ian Watkins had been attacked inside Wakefield Prison. According to reports, a trio of inmates, younger and with violent tendencies, managed to take Watkins hostage in his own cell. It's not clear how they captured or overcame him, but once they had him, they barricaded themselves inside. For 6 hours, the convicted rock singer was at the mercy of his captors. Other prisoners and guards later said they could hear shouting and commotion echoing through the wing. The situation escalated into a full-blown crisis. Prison officers in riot gear descended on the scene, and as negotiations failed, they resorted to force. They deployed stun grenades and breached the area to rescue Watkins. By the time they got him out, he had been brutally beaten and stabbed. Sources said he suffered multiple knife wounds, including a stab to the neck. Bleeding and in shock, Watkins was rushed under heavy guard to Leeds General Infirmary. For a moment it seemed like the end might be near, but he clung to life. Ultimately, his injuries were not life-threatening, and he recovered after hospital treatment. West Yorkshire police confirmed an assault had taken place, but no charges came immediately to light. In the brutal ecosystem of prison, such attacks on notorious inmates are almost expected. Watkins returned to Wakefield with fresh scars, and no doubt the stark realization that he had narrowly escaped death. On the morning of Saturday, October 11th, 2025, inside HMP Wakefield, the weekend routine had begun normally in the segregation wing. But at 9:39 a.m., an alarm rang out. Officers were summoned by an emergency call. A prisoner had been attacked. Guards rushing to the scene found a lifeless figure on the floor of a cell, blood pooling on the concrete. The victim was 48-year-old Ian Watkins. This time, there would be no rescue. Despite frantic efforts by medical staff, Watkins was pronounced dead on the scene. News of the incident spread quickly, both inside and outside the prison. Wakefield went into immediate lockdown. Inmates were confined to their cells as officers and detectives swarmed the wing to secure evidence and quarantine witnesses. It soon emerged that Watkins had been killed with a makeshift blade, likely fashioned from prison materials, a common weapon in inmate-on-inmate attacks. Initial reports suggested that a younger prisoner had slashed at Watkins with a knife, inflicting fatal wounds before guards could intervene. The swiftness of the attack left little chance for Watkins to defend himself or for officers to save him. It was over in moments. West Yorkshire police announced they had launched a murder inquiry. 2 male inmates, aged 25 and 43, were arrested on suspicion of murder in connection with Watkins' death and taken into custody for questioning. A prison service spokesperson gave a brief statement confirming an incident at Wakefield and noting that they could not comment further while the police investigation was ongoing. For the second time in as many years, Ian Watkins' name blared across news headlines, now as the victim of a prison killing. Media outlets around the world picked up the story within hours. "Disgraced Lostprophets singer killed in prison," read the headlines. In the days that followed, more details of Watkins' final moments trickled out. Sources confirmed that he was restrained from behind by one inmate, while his throat was cut with a knife by another inmate on that Saturday morning, and that he died before he could be transported to a hospital. It appeared to be a premeditated, targeted killing, not a random prison brawl. The timing was brazen, suggesting a deliberate intent to catch him off guard. Some insiders whispered that Watkins had a price on his head, whether from inmate vendettas or simply the infamy attached to his name. Others speculated about possible motives. Had Watkins clashed with someone recently? Was this retaliation for something or purely opportunistic? Those questions remained officially unanswered as the police inquiry continued. What was clear was the finality of it. Ian Watkins was dead, ending his 12-year stint behind bars in the bloodiest way imaginable. In the aftermath, West Yorkshire police made additional arrests. Within 10 days, 2 more prisoners were detained in connection with the murder, indicating a possible conspiracy, or at least indicating that multiple attackers were involved. Wakefield's reputation as Britain's toughest and most haunted prison was reinforced yet again. As one Yorkshire Post reporter grimly noted, Wakefield has seen many monsters meet their end within its walls, and Ian Watkins was now a notable addition to that list. For the survivors of Watkins's crimes, for the children he hurt now growing up, and their families, the news of his death brought complex emotions. Some must have felt a measure of relief that he could never harm anyone again, that he had faced the ultimate justice that the courts could not deliver. Others were surely left with unresolved anger, robbed of the chance to see him serve out his decades-long sentence and confront what he had done. The remaining members of Lostprophets, who had long since moved on with their lives, having formed a new band under a different name, declined to comment in detail. HMP Wakefield, for its part, faced tough questions. How had an inmate managed to craft or obtain a weapon and kill a high-profile prisoner under the watch of supposedly high security? The incident cast a spotlight on prison safety. The chief inspector of prisons' earlier report that violence was markedly on the rise at Wakefield now looked like a prophecy fulfilled. Unions and officials debated whether staffing cuts or complacency played a role. All the while, tabloid headlines blared the sensational aspects. Pedophile rock star slain in Monster Mansion. And so, the story of Ian Watkins ends, as starkly as it unfolded. From the heights of musical fame to the depths of infamy, he lived a life of extreme duality. He sang to thousands from the stage, then preyed on the innocent behind closed doors. He was served justice in a court of law, then dealt a different kind of justice, brutal and final, in a prison hallway. In death as in life, Ian Watkins was a figure of horror and tragedy. His rise and downfall stand as a sobering reminder of how the charisma of celebrity can mask the darkest of crimes, and how, even in supposedly secure institutions, retribution can come calling. Thanks for joining me for this edition of Fridays with Tony. Up until his murder, Ian Watkins was already largely forgotten. His name will eventually fade again from the public memory, like a one-hit wonder you can't quite remember the words to anymore, but for now, it evokes 2 reactions. For music fans, a shudder at the story of a band tainted by its singer's sins. For the broader public, a curse, being reminded again of one of Britain's most depraved criminals. See you next week.